Finding yourself lost in the finding ways to be found, getting into your mind, lost in you need to put in the work to be as successful at what you're doing, right?
You definitely do. There are people who get lucky, and then, but even people who work hard still need some luck and some timing on their side because the the marketplace, if you're going to call that the success being, success in the marketplace, is all about sort of hitting it at the right time when people want to engage with you. So there's more involved than just hard work. Sometimes it has to be luck, but there is a saying too: the harder I work, the luckier I get. You know what I'm saying? So like, yeah, the more hard work you put in, the more likely you are to be in the right place when the opportunities and the luck does show up. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and it's all about like finding the ways through the motions, being able to be realistic with yourself. Because the thing is, if you want to be the most successful version of yourself, you got to be real with yourself. You got to start with you, you
That,
know?
that's entirely true. And you also have to enjoy the journey. Like, if you're only focused on the goals, like I'm not going to be happy until I'm rich and famous,
Oof.
it's going to be
Yeah.
a long road and it's going to be a tough one. And then I think once you get there, you're going to be like, well, the money didn't really help. What was making me unhappy? And the adulation of fans doesn't really help what's making me unhappy. So you kind of have to enjoy the process, no matter what you do or where you are in your journey, I think.
Yeah, and it's just starting in starting in the groove,
Yeah.
getting lost in the groove.
Yeah. Yeah.
I how do you like to be preferred to be called? Do you like to be called Ivan or you like to be called Funky Boy? How do you
Well, Funk Boy, there's no
Funk
Y in the
Boy?
middle of it, but
Oh, my
I answer
apologies.
to all good, man. I answer to just about anything.
Anything.
I've been called much, much worse, whatever you come up with. So no worries.
I love that. And I feel like I'm going to get to hear like your experience and kind of your story and kind of get in detail because to be honest, some of the coolest things you can learn from people is ones that have actually like seen it, witnessed it,
Mm-hmm.
like been a part of it, like
Right.
actually did the grind to get there.
Well, I think that's certainly representative way of looking at what I've done. I've absolutely been a fly on the wall for many, many things, and I've stood next to some really, really, really big rock stars. So I'm comfortable talking about that because, yeah, I've been there, I've seen that, and I've seen what show business looks like on a grand scale. I don't participate in it every single day because there is a lot of, punching the clock and working for a living in between. But yeah, I've certainly been there. I feel qualified and comfortable talking about that kind of stuff.
How long have you been in the business? Like how long have you been performing as a musician?
I picked up a bass guitar for the first time as a senior in high school. So, like, I sort of dabbled with some instruments, before that, junior high, elementary school, but nothing really took, nothing really stuck until the bass guitar kind of was like calling my name. I think I have a theory that your instrument chooses you. It's sort of like your personality type is geared for a certain instrument. Also, I'm a tall person, so like I'm 6'5", so like a bass feels good in my hands. It's a big instrument, I'm a
Yeah.
big person. Personality wise, it works for me. I like being supportive. I like being foundational. I like setting up the groove. So yeah, since the senior in high school, so it's been a long, long time I've been doing it now, but I kind of got a late start. Like a lot of people really start out quite young, and I got there. I got to the party late. Let's put it that way.
There's nothing wrong being late to the party. You'd be surprised. Some of the coolest people are the ones that come late to the party,
Yes, perhaps I was
the
just
after party.
fashionably late,
Ooh.
fashionably late. But since then, it's been decades of doing it. Really like, and I should say too, to qualify or quantify things, I haven't had an additional day job to help support myself since 1995. That was the last
Wow.
time I actually punched an actual clock. Even though I call my gigs punching the clock, that was the last time I had supplemental income. All the rest of it since then has been from playing bass, believe it or not,
Being a performer. It's
being a
so
performer.
crazy. It's so, it's so hard to be realistic with yourself,
Hmm.
because when you're an artist, when you're a musician, and you face yourself this where, well, what kind of career do I have for myself? I feel there's so many opportunities, especially now. Even years ago
Right.
there was opportunities, but now it's even more,
That's right.
w- that you can be an successful artist, but I feel it takes time, and it's not quick.
It right. It takes time and development. The problem is, I think, or not the problem, but one of the syndromes that I notice is that, starting with, let's say, the American Idol phenomenon. So this is going back, what, 20 years now? What would happen was a quote unquote unknown singer would show up, sing for 3 minutes on worldwide national television and be instantly famous. So I think a lot of people thought, like, yeah, it takes 3 minutes to become famous. And it did, except takes 10 years and then 3 minutes, like to really develop your craft and become that much of a superstar level singer to then be able to sing one song on national television and win the contest. You know what I mean?
It's all about being able to find your voice.
Indeed, indeed. And that takes time and it takes energy and it takes diligence and it takes, as you say, being honest with yourself, because you're constantly surrounded by people. There are people who have gotten very successful without necessarily going through those motions because of whatever timing, television opportunities, or whatever. So you see people that sort of like jump to the head of the line, and you kind of sort of think like, so am I missing something by not being on that same footing with them? And by the same token, you see people who have put in the work, and just from watching them, they're way better than I'll ever be. When you see someone like the jazz masters.
Yeah,
So
but
then
they're
I,
different. I always feel, especially with, I play guitar.
yeah.
I'm 2 years in. You might as well call me an infant with a diaper in regards to guitar playing.
Yeah,
But I feel that each artist becomes the best version of themselves, especially with like guitar playing. Take like Bob Dylan, for example.
right.
Um, yeah, nobody can ever be better than Bob Dylan, because there's only
Mhm.
one Bob Dylan. But you can inspire and make yourself, the Eric Clapton. Then you get the Eric Clapton, and then it all stems from there. It's all about taking. I feel it's all about taking inspiration from other artists,
I
and
I agree with that, yeah,
yeah,
for sure. And also, I remember hearing about a commencement address at a music school, and I forget who said it was. It was one of the great old jazz bass players, but he's the 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 saying that I took away with me is, it said, "Remember, each of you has something to give that no one else has." Meaning, like, all of the culmination of your experiences and your inspirations combine in a way that's unique to you, no matter what your level or skill set is, like that you have an individualist statement that you can make as an artist that nobody else can do because nobody else shares your exact same set of influences, experiences, etc. So if you kind of keep that in mind and don't make it a horse race with everybody else in your class, which is very easy to do, then you can sort of like give yourself the space to go ahead and create and as you say, find your voice, whatever that is.
it's very hard to mold an artist, and
Yeah.
there's a reason why.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. And you mentioned Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan is the world's greatest Bob Dylan style songwriter. You know what I mean? Like he's his own unique combination of influences, and he's a genius writer, clearly, but he's developed, and we're fortunate as fans over 50 years, 60 years of hearing his
Hmm.
output, his recorded output, to know what sort of longevity he has, what kind of genius he has. But yeah, he's, again, he's the most unique Bob Dylan style of artist in the world.
Yeah, and it's where you have to understand that you can never become better than an artist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want
That's
to
right.
take a, I always like this is the greatest modern example. Bruno Mars and Michael
Mm,
Jackson.
sure.
Like, you want to say Bruno is a Michael wannabe? I don't think so. I think
Hmm.
Bruno Mars is an example of an artist and a creator that was so inspired by this man, created his own version. Like, Bruno Mars is Bruno Mars.
Correct. Correct. And it's not only Michael that he's inspired by. He's inspired by Al Green. He's inspired by
Yeah.
the classic soul artists, the Gap Band. You can even go back. There's a very sort of famous example to track is the Beatles. The Beatles started out as a cover band, and they were playing American rhythm and blues music. They were playing blues. They were trying to be Little Richard. They got it wrong. They did, their British version of Little Richard, and it came out, and suddenly it's the Beatles. It's like, they're heavily, heavily influenced by Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Fats Domino and the American blues artists and R&B artists. And just by nature of where they came from and who they are, even when they're playing a Little Richard cover song verbatim, it comes out sounding like Beatles, you know. And then then they went off in their own direction and came up with their own stuff. But, like as much as, and the Rolling Stones too, the Rolling Stones, are covering Muddy Waters and, American blues.
People forget that.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that there was the Rolling Stones period.
Right. That's where the name comes from is, I'm a Rolling Stone. It's a Muddy Waters tune. So, again, they got it wrong. They tried to emulate it as closely as they could, but in the process of getting it wrong, they came up with a sound known as Rolling Stones. So that's artistic development. Sort of whoever you try to emulate, you're probably not going to become a sound-alike or a clone after a point. You're gonna
Unless
come
you're
up
an
with
impersonator. See,
true. Yeah,
there is a weird side where there are people that are impersonators. There are people
that's
that'll be
right.
Elvis impersonators,
That's right.
um, Michael impersonators.
Hmm.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong.
Right.
Kudos to you, but it's weird.
But I don't think I think that's a business model. Like it's
Yeah.
having a tribute band. Like we're going to do this because the fans want to see this music. And there's not, again, as you say, there's nothing wrong with that. Because some people do a wonderful job recreating that music. Because Michael's not touring right now, so having somebody do a Michael Jackson impersonation, because Michael was thrilling to watch. So having somebody who can copy those moves now, it's amazing to see that live.
Do you understand so funny? Dave Matthews.
Hmm.
So reality is his tickets have become so unaffordable that most people don't even have the money. Like
Right.
it's over $1,000.
Wow.
So there's a Dave Matthews tribute band,
Uh-huh.
and they perform throughout the United States. And I saw them live. They're
Yeah.
pretty much like Dave Matthews,
Yeah. For
and
$25.
for $25,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
awesome.
It's great.
That's a great example of like
Sure.
where you need a cover band.
That's right. That's right. I'm not mad at those guys at all. There's
No,
a,
I thank them. I
sure,
seriously thank them. Yeah.
sure, sure, sure. Again, but I think that's almost a business decision rather than an
Yeah.
artistic choice.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
if you talk to the guys in tribute bands, and I know a lot of people who do tribute bands, if you talk to them, they also have their own original recordings that they do, that they want you to listen to, and like, all right, that's cool. And it's exactly the same thing with the Stones and the Beatles, and like they're trying to sound in the style of, let's say, Dave Matthews or whoever they're emulating, but it's their own thing. It's putting their own spin on the thing, whether they mean to or not. Because you can't.
See, this is my own personal opinion, and this is a
Hmm.
problem I've had for years. It's with Adam Lambert.
Right,
Okay. He's talented. Don't get me wrong.
unbelievably,
Unbelievably talented.
yeah.
But I just feel the amount of disrespect personally that has
Mm.
been towards Freddie. Because like we've been
Mm.
saying over here is he's dead. He's been dead
Right.
for almost over 30 years.
He's not available to tour.
He's not available to tour anymore. Like, you're Adam Lambert. You're
Mhm.
performing in Queen. You need to represent Adam Lambert for Queen,
Right.
not tribute to Freddie Mercury. And
Mhm.
I find that a little bit insulting.
It's a very tough position he's in, I have to say, because it's the same thing with what's the gentleman's name? Parnell, who's the lead singer for Journey now.
Yeah.
He's a tremendous singer. He's an outrageously great singer, but he is recreating music that Steve Perry made famous, and Adam is recreating music that Freddie made famous. So if he's touring with you know the guys in Queen, Brian and the guys, like he's got to sing Freddie songs. That's what he's got to do. But also Adam Lambert, he's an artist on his own
Right.
right, and so he wants to present himself as an artist, but he's in the world's greatest Queen cover band in a weird way, right?
Unfortunately, yeah, that's kind of, I mean, we don't like to talk about it, but like when Tom Petty passed away,
Mm, yeah, that
it
was
was
tough.
over.
Yeah,
Like, no one wanted to admit it, but that generation was over.
yeah,
And you have to ask yourself the question, like, how are we going to rebuild as artists? Are we just going to keep on cover band, tribute,
right.
business capital, or take from that and make something from it that's new?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Which, I don't know.
Well, again, one's an artistic decision and one's a business decision.
Right.
So, the quote unquote legacy touring artists are sort of like the top grossing concert acts of the day. And introducing a new act into the marketplace now doesn't work the same way it used to. Like, you used to try to get a hit on the radio, and then you would sell recordings, and then you would sell, merchandise, and then you would go on tour. And now that kind of business model doesn't exist in the same way. Like, now what's your options? You become a YouTube star or a TikTok sensation.
Right.
How does that translate? It doesn't translate directly into a concert career. So it's a little. I think people are still finding their footing for what the new business model is. There are certainly people doing wonderfully artistic things. And the thing about a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers was it was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. It was, that group of people that started in Florida playing music in the 1970s, and developed that sound over years and years and miles and miles and years, till they became that tight of a hardworking unit. And
He was a
then,
different.
yeah.
He was a different type of singer and like, think about like Free Fallin'. I know that's such
Mhm.
an overrated song, but
No,
just the vocals in that song.
genius.
You play that song in a convertible,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
People are going to be like, free
Yeah.
falling, just going along. It's just, again, being inspired by what did he do that makes people do that? Like, what was it that was it the lyrics? Was it his voice? Was it the tone? What was it?
Yeah, I think there are, and he's not alone. There are other people that have
Of
done that, but
course.
they've mastered the guys at Motown, the writers at Motown, like Holland Dozier Holland talked about mastering the art of creating a 3-minute symphony.
Ooh, okay. I
You
like
know,
this. Yeah.
so in fact, they even called one of the Supreme songs "I Hear a Symphony." Whenever I'm near you, I hear a symphony. Right. So they have this. They're thinking in terms of they have a miniature amount of time because radio formats are very tight. So you're going to get 2.5 to 3 minutes tops of
Right.
airplay.
People
So
forget that's actually why songs are that short.
correct,
Yeah.
and that even went back to the old 7-inch record, the 45 RPM, only held about 3 or 4 minutes of music. Like, you couldn't make a longer song without in that format. So that kind of begat the radio formats and the top 40 formats. So yeah, so the guys at Motown, they had to create this entire symphonic vision, start to finish, beginning, middle, and end, intro, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus out, like this really tight sort of format. And Petty and the Heartbreakers, again, it very much a band effort, even though I think Free Fallin' was probably on his solo album, quote unquote.
Yeah.
the Wildflowers album. But it was, he developed in concert, in conjunction with the rest of the guys in the band, in terms of like putting together parts, putting together song structures, these genius simple melodies. This is why everybody sings along to Free Falling, because everybody immediately hears it. It's a hook. It's a 3-note hook. Everybody can do it. You know what I mean? Like
Do you know who was also? Do you know? Like I'm sorry. This is just me. I just jumped from artist to artist.
Yeah.
Ramones.
Yeah.
You want to talk about like you play Ramones is also a great example. It's where you don't need elaborate lyrics. Again, it's a symphony of punk.
Right.
That's what Ramones is. It's a
With
symphony
them,
of punk.
and in 2 minutes with them, because their songs were like 2 minutes long. Like they had everything they needed to say. And what they were, again, they were basically taking the roots, the foundations of American rock and roll. This is like Elvis, Chuck Berry, Little Richard.
Right.
And
That's
just playing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3-chord rock, 3 chords in the truth, 3-chord rock and roll. I'm just playing it faster. I had sort of punk velocity, saying what they had to say. And 2 minutes in and out. And just each song was like a little perfect little gem, And P.S. by the way, I'm speaking to you tonight from Forest Hills, Queens, which is the home of the Ramones. They went to high school about 10 blocks that way.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel their energy in this neighborhood.
It's kind of weird fact about them when they were doing like performances.
Yeah.
Because their songs were so short.
Yeah.
You could actually watch this on YouTube. It's so funny. They would finish a set in 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
And then they would go off. And they'd be like, "What are you doing? Get back up there." And they're like, "What do you mean go back up there?" They're like, "You have to perform more." They're like, "We don't have anything to perform more." That was all their songs they had. So they would get back up on stage and you're watching this and they're just like, 1, 2, 3, 4. And they would just start the thing all over again.
That's right.
All over again. It's so funny.
Yeah, later on, their shows were like 30 songs. Wouldn't be, an hour set for most artists is like 12 songs maybe. Theirs were like 30. Everything was so short. 1, 2, 3, 4, done. Great.
Oh my God.
Perfect.
But it's just so amazing on just how much inspiration came out of that. Like talking about Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Right.
They formed an entire like sphere, genre, and culture. Ramones literally is the reason why so many punk bands exist.
Correct.
From so many different varieties and different genres, from New York, from California, from Memphis, Tennessee, all the way to Hawaii, like Cleveland, Ohio. It's just amazing when you just sit down and you realize we all are here to inspire each other and allow each other to grow.
Yeah, well,
see that.
The Ramones, they started in about 1974?
Yeah.
Sex Pistols didn't come out till 76. Like the big punk movie was 77. That was kind of when the UK, like everything was punk this, the punk that, punk the other thing. Yeah, they were at 74. They were one of the first bands to play CBGBs. Like, started an entire genre, an entire scene. And they'll say that they were inspired by Iggy and the Stooges, who were a little bit
Velvet Underground. Yeah.
Velvet Underground to a point, yeah. But again, like it was all coming from that 3-chord rock and roll from the late 50s. That's what they were about, And
well, Iggy, you want to talk about like the Stooges? Iggy even said this. Like he was inspired of the blues, like that that's what drove him crazy. He wanted to like make it angry and
right.
So yeah, it is straight just progressive music from another culture to something else. So
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. And that was also, speaking of Iggy and the Stooges and people from Detroit, the MC5.
Ooh,
they were very, very influential to the Ramones and other people like that. Like it was the same thing. It was like 3 chords. We're going to turn our amps up to 12. It's going to be as loud as it can possibly be. But it's just raw energy coming off the stage. It was amazing.
Just having the opportunity to be in that area, because the thing is, like, you're a bass player. Mm-hmm. So when you're around instruments and you're around other instruments and then everybody's playing And there's like a symphony of harmonics of like the drum player, the bass player, the guitar player. If you got like a keyboard, you got something playing over there. Um, and just people just like raw, like screaming, just being there. That is
Yeah.
another dimension. It really is.
100%, 100%. And there's a thing that happens when you have like-minded people in a band together. We're in a room in a crowd too, but in a band together. If you go up and you start playing guitar by yourself, that's one thing. If you get another musician to come in and join you playing the same song, like, suddenly, the more pieces you kind of put into the band, something happens. A synergy happens, and it becomes greater than the sum of its parts. So there's not just, there's a reason why there's so many 4 and 5 piece rock bands, because it sounds better. Like you're covering the full tonal spectrum. Everybody's got these parts that are interplaying and contrapuntally bouncing off one another, and it creates this vibration which is much bigger and more powerful than what any one musician usually can do on their own. There are some people who play solo that are just mesmerizing, but even some of those people, like if you, as mesmerizing as they are solo, if you put them in an ensemble, suddenly you start multiplying that. And I've seen a lot of bands where like you can kind of look at each individual musician and go like, maybe that each chair isn't a virtuoso, but when you put them all together, suddenly like it explodes.
Big
It's much more,
star.
yeah. Oh, for
Big
sure,
star.
for sure. Everything that happened in Americana, jangle pop, roots rock and roll, from
Crazy.
Pylon to the DBs to REM, and everything that came out of them all came from Big Star. Everything started with Big Star.
And
Rock band in Memphis, Tennessee.
I always say this: play a Big Star.
Yeah.
Don't tell the person what year it is. Just
Right.
play it.
That's right.
And,
Timeless.
and it's kind of weird. You listen to this like, wait a minute, this came in 1975? No, it didn't. What?
73 was before that.
73? Yeah.
September Girls.
13?
Oh, jeez. Wow.
It's crazy.
Heavy. Yeah. Really crazy.
It's kind of very strange to kind of go back and realize the pioneers for a lot of music that we have today.
Mm-hmm.
And these are people back then that, again, very little access. People weren't very aware unless like you were in the crowd. Kind of how the music scene existed in New York City, like with
Mm-hmm.
Queens and Brooklyn and Manhattan, how they developed. But now that we're about 40 or 50 years into the future, looking back at it,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much that we can learn, but at the same time be like, how did they do that?
Right. Well, you can only kind of write the history book in retrospect. Like sort of going into it, and I've talked to people that were around that scene at that time, like they didn't realize what they were creating at the time, because you don't really know until you look back and go like, oh yeah, I guess that influenced X, Y, and Z, or became popular with legions of fans. And even though you may aspire to do that setting out, you don't know if you succeeded until you look in the rearview mirror, right?
The craziest thing, though, is when you this is why I love YouTube. When you listen to these clips
Mm-hmm.
of like solo, like guitar solos or bass solo. Oh, and I know it's like raunchy and it's old, but just that moment in time, that
Mm-hmm.
artist is just, it's the instrument, the crowd,
Right.
and that progression, that
Uh-huh.
chord progression. Oh, just an absolute mesmer. I can't do that shit, but
Right.
just the raw talent that it takes to be able to be that type of performer. I don't know.
Well, again, and we touched on this before. Like there is raw talent, but there's also like the hours you need to put in as a technician to be able to get your hands to move in the right way to make that instrument respond in that way. I forget who said this. This is a saying that I've had with me my entire life, and I can't remember the source of it anymore. But it was sort of like to the effect of like music is something that only comes to visit us for short periods of time. We can be playing, but when it jumps to the level of becoming music, like this higher sort of concept, this higher sort of vibration enters the room. It only happens at certain times and in certain combinations, and it has to be a combination between the artists and the interplay on the band. It has to be with the audience as well. Like they have to be ready to receive it and also tuned in. But when those things happen, when they all lock in, the saying was like music visits at that point for a short period of time. And the object is to try to create more and more opportunities for the music to come visit, because we're just being technicians on stage. We're putting this finger here and this finger there, and a G note comes out, great. But to make that
What do you do with that G?
transcendental, yeah, right, exactly, to make that into music requires so many things to have gone right up to that moment. So, and again, the harder you work, the luckier you get. The more you practice, the more opportunities there will be for these moments to come visit. So that's kind of what I've always aspired to when I'm not, playing a bar mitzvah and just making a paycheck.
Ooh, I feel you. Oh
Yeah.
my god. It's it's so weird though because I live out here in South Florida
Hmm.
and they have like local venues, like local breweries, and they have artists that come out and they perform. And there's no stage.
Right. Sure.
It's it's a brewery.
Yeah. You move two
It's
tables from the corner. You move them
yeah,
aside. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
I
And you
do it
just let
all
the
the time.
yeah, and you just let the person play guitar, or you let a drummer come in there and play.
Yeah.
And
Without a
I
tip bucket.
make sure you fill it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's because that's all they're getting paid.
That's right.
I'm not joking.
Yeah. I know.
Uh,
I know.
it's just it's very, because we were touching on this. It's very odd listening to music through a video and then physically being there.
Right.
And I'm serious, you can experience live music without going to Aerosmith and spending over $1,000.
Right. True.
It's not Aerosmith, but you're still getting that same type of, and it's not even that. And I think it's also important where I feel it can also be very good for mental health.
Hmm.
Because as an artist, a lot of times you get frustrated with the guitar and I'm like, ugh, I don't want to do this. It's not working.
It's
And
hard.
then
I like it.
I don't like it. And then you go out and you listen to music, and then you're talking about like that moment. You kind of like, oh, this is interesting. You get into that vibe, and then you go back home and you figure it out.
Yeah.
Combination clicks.
Well, there's a thing that happens in your brain when you don't have your instrument in your hands. It's kind of like, what dream work does to your brain while you're sleeping. Like your brain's working, even though you're asleep, your brain's working. So even if you're not playing the bass or the guitar, whatever your instrument is, your mind is working on things. So as you say, you can get a, a jolt of inspiration from anywhere that has nothing to do with it. And then when you go back to your instrument, you're like, oh, hey, wait a minute. And suddenly it starts to come out of your hands in a way that you were envisioning. And that's a thrilling moment when that's happened, when you start to be able to actually have control over the sound that's coming out. Um, it's a thrilling thing, really is.
It's also kind of like weird because when you first start playing an instrument, like even before you even start, I had this question like, oh, is this the right instrument for me?
Mm,
Why, I'm starting with acoustic guitar. I could start with, she's part of the podcast.
I hear you. I got you.
And I just kind of realize I'm going to start with this and kind of figure out where it goes.
Right.
And I feel like for anyone that's listening to this, I feel like for me personally, when you walk into a music store, just walk around,
Yeah.
just
Something's going to call
experience.
your name, right?
Yeah, you'll find which one is the one you want to play. Trust
It's
me.
funny. I have a very specific story that mirrors exactly what you're saying. I saw an advertise. I needed, I'm a bass player, but I needed a knockaround guitar for the home studio just so I could bash some chords out for demos or whatever. Like I'm not trying to be a serious guitar player at all. So, but I didn't have one. I didn't own a 6-string guitar. So a music store not far from me, it was actually in Queens, had an advertisement. It's like, this solid body electric guitar is on sale for $200. I was like, $200. This is going back. I was probably There's a lot more instruments now you can find that are usable for $200. Back back in the olden days, back in the olden times, you really couldn't get an instrument that was functional for that kind of price point. So I was very excited when I saw that's a deep discount. I'm going to go play this guitar because I think if it's usable at all, I'm getting it. This is going to be great. I need one. So I went to the music store and I picked up the guitar and I started playing it. My 3 campfire chords that I know on guitar. Sounded awful, but
I love
I,
that.
it was, and I was like, all right. The guitar didn't excite me. It was like, oh, all right, cool. And the guy's like, you want it? I'm like, yeah, I think I do, but let me think about it for a minute. So I put it down and I did exactly what you said. I just started walking around the store and I picked up, they had an acoustic guitar, a steel string acoustic guitar, same price. And I just picked it up and I just strummed one chord on it. I was like, this is the guitar I need, is this one. It immediately resonated with me. Like immediately. I said,
I
oh,
love an acoustic guitar.
yeah, and I wasn't in the market for one at all. Didn't need it, but that's what I ended up getting. It's like, I got an electric one many years later, but the acoustic one was like, it spoke to me. It resonated in a way, physically and intellectually with me that I was like, no, no, that's the guitar I'll enjoy playing. The other one, it wasn't any fun. I was like, it doesn't. I don't know. It's not singing. It's not making any sense. Yeah.
It's weird because like I had this conversation with shout out to Carissa, which hosts American Groove, was talking about because a lot of the honestly like a lot of the music I listen to is electric guitar.
Hmm.
A lot of the artists that I like is all electric guitar, and she's like, "Why do you play acoustic?" And I seriously feel the same way. I look, I love electric guitar,
Hmm.
but I just felt for me, it just I can picture myself just sitting on a rock all by
Right.
myself,
Yeah.
playing on the guitar,
Yeah.
you know? And you don't get that with an electric guitar. I'm sorry, you just don't.
It's different. It's
It's
not
very
not
different.
not better or worse, it's just different. I mean,
No,
that's
it's very
we
different.
talked about Dave Matthews before. Dave's only plays nylon string acoustic guitars, that's his whole vibe. And he's with a
Mhm.
big band playing in an arena, and he's playing a nylon string acoustic. You're like, "All right, cool, dig it."
Very
The
90s.
orchestrational, yeah, yeah,
Very
yeah.
mid 90s.
It's an
Oh.
orchestrational choice that he made, and I get it. I'm like, "Yeah, that's his voice, is that stupid guitar."
Oh my god. I love this.
Yeah, yeah.
God. The funny thing about like the 90s, especially because there are still a lot of 90s bands that are around.
Sure.
Um it was just a weird time when these bands formed, and to people that just don't get the vibe or just don't get the dig, and I don't blame you.
Mhm.
It was 20 years ago, and I think I know why it was over 20 years ago. For good reason.
It's almost 30 now. Some of those
Almost
songs
30.
are, yeah. Uh,
Please.
93. Nirvana's over 30 years ago now. You're like, "Wow, that hurts."
I I don't listen to Nirvana without Kurt Cobain. I'm
Uh-huh.
serious. I don't listen to anything without if it doesn't have Kurt Cobain, I don't listen.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Fair
It's
enough.
weird. Yeah,
Fair
I
enough.
it's just weird because we're talking about music,
Mhm.
and there are like performers and artists that when they go, I feel personally that it's like you literally close a coffin. Like you close a chapter in something, and,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
you realize that this type of genre, this type of influence will no longer ever be made.
Right.
You can't replicate this.
Yeah, no, I believe that. I believe that. And there's some of these towering artists who passed away young, or Tom Petty not that young, but too soon, let's say. like, but a Kurt Cobain, can you imagine what he would have done in the next 10, 15 years or the next 30 years if he'd been allowed to continue to create that music, where he could have gone, or Hendrix, or, any of those kind of people. Like Hendrix was about to do an album with Miles Davis. That was the next project they
Ooh.
were working on. Can you imagine where that would have gone, before he passed away? Like it, it's tragic. It's really tragic when an artist like that, decides they need to check out or get themselves checked out through uh, mayhem or whatever happens, But
I think though there are sometimes the most beautiful things that come out of it, like
Mhm.
David Bowie. I have to say,
Yeah,
his best album personally that he's ever made is Black Star.
okay, all right.
Because
I'm not going to fight you on that.
no, like there's something so beautiful where it feels like his will, his memoir, his biography in
Yeah,
one album.
yeah.
And there is like like I was saying, like that journey, that genre, that end. But you sometimes get those moments where, okay, you're able to accept it because this is what you get in, in the end. Like I hate to even say that. You're like, okay, he's dead, but at least we have this. That's kind of what you're
Well,
you're
it's
saying. Yeah.
yeah. Well, none of us get out of this thing alive. Not one of us do.
No.
But can you imagine being an artist of David Bowie's depth and stature, and you are handed your expiration date? You're told, like, you have 2 to 3 years to live, or whatever it is, whatever he was given that diagnosis. Now write a record, and that's what he did. Like, that record is all about, like, saying, "This is going to be the last one, folks," you know. And here's what I got to say, and without proclaiming that, not without telling everybody that's what that was, but again, when we look back on it, we realize that's exactly what that was. This is my final, literally my final artistic statement to the world. Oof, it's heavy, man. Very, very heavy.
Yeah, and it's just weird because as artists, it's like the the part of Diagon Alley you don't want to go to.
Mhm.
It's where those gravestones you don't want to over unturn, but it's so important and such a great part of music culture
Right.
because without these influences, without the shape and mold of culture and the way that instruments are played, bro, do you
Mhm.
understand how boring music would be?
Yeah. Right.
God.
Yeah, yeah. You need some of these kind of, like, candles that burn twice as bright but half as long, to keep that whole sphere interesting, right?
Yeah. It's like you don't need it's kind of weird because when you think about like even Kurt Cobain,
Mhm.
even the fact that he died at 27,
Mhm.
but the fact that he died and now all of these years, just look at all of the music that's come out of it, the culture, the creation, everything.
Mhm.
And
Right.
sometimes it's not about them being alive. Sometimes it's
Mhm.
what happens afterwards.
And without Nirvana, I mean, quite literally, we wouldn't have Foo Fighters with, the long career that they've had
Till now,
till now,
still going.
still going, still going, and
Crazy.
still killing it, still killing it. I mean, they're out there just, ripping it up all the time. Dave Grohl on a video just last week sitting in with the Pretenders at the Glastonbury Festival. He just went up and ripped the place apart. I'm like, all right, dude, you got to hand it to the guy, man.
Bro,
Can't be
another
mad.
level.
Yeah,
I think of like Mick Jagger.
78 years old.
He's weightlifting, like he's running. I think it was like 10 or 15 miles a day, something insane.
Yeah.
And he's still performing and like no time quitting. This guy has been performing for over 6 decades.
Right.
Like this is Paul McCartney level of like
Yeah. And
6 decades.
doesn't need the money anymore either.
No,
Doesn't need the money.
none of them need the money anymore. Like they're too
That's right.
rich.
That's right. Paul doesn't need the money. Paul's the richest musician ever on the face of the earth
At this
from
point, yeah.
songwriting. Yeah, he's like a billionaire from songwriting royalties. It's unheard of. Still wants
Crazy.
to tour. Still wants to tour. He wants to play gigs. Can't be mad at him.
No. That's how artists are though. It's like I feel in many ways it's you tell an artist retirement, they're like, "What is that?"
Retire from what?
What else am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to
Yeah,
sit on a couch?
yeah, right. I think it was Mark Maron. I heard him interviewing Sir Paul McCartney, and he asked that question that so many interviewers ask, because a lot of artists, as they mature and they grow older, countless times you've heard the artist say, like, I think I'm doing my best work now, right? Because I've learned more. You mature, you learn as you go. It's easier to make records, it's easier to whatever. So he asked McCartney, like, do you feel that? Do you feel like you're doing your best work now? He said, I was in the Beatles. Set a very high bar very early on, and even he knows, like, I'm not going to ever quite beat that because it was such a global phenomenon.
You know what's funny though? They all realize that because look at like George Harrison's career.
Yeah,
He's like, I'm never going to beat the Beatles, so
right.
I'm going to take my influence of Hindu and Buddhism and Indian culture and make my own thing. And
Absolutely.
that's what he did for 20, I think 20 or 30 years until he passed away. So
And his first solo album was a triple album. It was a
I
3 album
have it.
thing. Yeah,
I have
of
the
course.
first edition. I ripped the cover, but
Because he had all those songs saved up from the Beatles. The Beatles were giving him one song an album. He's like, what? I got all these other ones. He was writing. He's an enormously creative and successful songwriter. But the problem was he was in the same band with John Lennon and Paul McCartney. So it was like, having being a towering giant among two slightly more towering giants, is it's a very difficult position to be in. So that's why that first album is like, yeah, I got 3 albums worth of material. Here it all is, and it's all genius. It's all genius.
the thing is, I feel the most this personally, I feel like the most important Beatle out of all of them was George Harrison.
Mm-hmm.
George, I never met the man. I mean, he died way before I was even out of diapers.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a man of compassion and kindness. I mean, he went through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of bringing your soul, bringing your love and spirit, and in a way meditation with the instrument,
That's right.
the way that he strum his guitar like over run of the mill.
I think also, again, we alluded to this earlier. The four of them were great writers, great musicians, all four of them. But then when you put them all together, suddenly it wasn't just like four times one. It was greater than the sum of its parts. They became transcendent.
They needed to separate. I really
Sure.
people hate it, but look at what they created. I
Hmm.
would take George Harrison's solo career over anything every day.
Hmm.
Any day.
Sure.
Come on.
Sure. But it had to be the four of them to be what that was.
Yeah, 100%. For that
Again,
11 years. Yeah.
right. If you're not sure, just ask Pete Best what he thinks of it. You know what I mean? Like, it had to be that unit to work that way, for as well as it did for, what did they write, 220 songs or whatever it is, like.
Yeah. I think
Just
over 11, I think it was over 11 years
Mhm.
of recording. On
Less than that. No, because they started around 62, 63, and they were done by 70. They were done. 69, 70. They were done. So,
they quit by 60. It's
yeah,
crazy. Yeah,
yeah.
very short.
Very, very meteoric. Literally, that's the definition of a meteoric career.
It's wild because a lot of there are, I feel, like pockets of time where the heaviest of like inspiration in music take like 1929 to 1933, take 1944 to 1947. I'm using these specific years for a reason.
Right.
1955 to 1958, take 66 all the way to 69.
Right.
These were just, and I'm not trying to look back at the past like, oh boo-hoo, we're not there anymore. I just
We're not.
there's so much to learn from these artists. they're not around anymore, so we can't talk to them. But what can we learn from these people?
Mhm. Well, the music's still here, and you can dissect
Yeah.
it and pull apart each of the components and say, okay, well, that's what the bass does. That's what the guitar does. That's what the drums do. This is what the recording studio sounded like. This is the mics they were using. And you can learn from all of that, from all of each component of it. And then, like we say, create something that's in your voice that's inspired by X, Y, or Z. Because what you're talking about, these little fertile periods of time, are means there are things in the popular culture, in the zeitgeist, if you will, that sort of coalesce at these particular moments, like the explosion of rock and roll, which you're talking about 55 to 58.
Yeah.
That was all, there's a whole bunch of people working separately on the same sort of idea, so bang, you got Little Richard, you got Fats Domino, you got Chuck Berry, like all these things are just like, you know, coming together like nuclear fusion and exploding into the marketplace. Because then, also at that point, you have to have somebody like Alan Freed, the disc jockey in Cleveland, who started playing the records.
Yeah, because people don't know this, and this is just a harsh reality of the past. A lot of these black artists weren't allowed their own label rights.
Right.
So they weren't, if they wanted to sign to a label, they weren't even allowed to put their names.
Mm,
So they weren't even getting credits for the work that they were doing. So they were a kind of, I guess it was the early day of whistleblowers. So it were people that were white, that disc jockeys, people that were broadcasters, that would try to be able to help out as much for the black community as they could. And it's so amazing because look what it allowed us to have because of that shared community of when that blast just happens. Like, we got to make this happen. How do we make this happen? How do we let everybody hear this?
right. And strictly from a business decision point of view, Sam Phillips, who owned Sun Records and Sun Studios in Memphis, said at that time, famously out loud in English, if I could find a white performer who sounded black, I'd make $1 million. And then walked into the studio Elvis Presley. And that's exactly what happened. He's like, suddenly we have a Caucasian face to put on the record jacket in this incredibly polarized and segregated time in our history. And Elvis would say it too. Like he was copying Big Boy Crudup. He was playing his version of African American generated music, but for an audience and a marketplace that was only allowed to have Caucasian faces in it. Very, very, very weird the way that all went down. But that's why he became such a sensation, because it suddenly, like, you could sneak the records into the households of, and the teenagers, look, Caucasian artists, we're
Yeah,
fine
it's
here.
fine. It's
Not a
cool.
problem.
No
Yeah,
problems over here.
that's right. Nothing to see here, folks.
But it's so weird what you are able to create and be able to make. You see, the thing is, when it comes to artists, and let's just be real and put this on the table, when we come together as a community, you as a bass player performing with bands and being there with other people, doesn't matter your sex, doesn't matter your color, doesn't matter your religion, doesn't matter who you are. Matters is that we are performers, we are instrumentalists, we are artists, we are creators.
Right.
We're here to perform.
Hmm. And music is the universal language too. Like, you don't
Yes.
have to speak, the same dialect of anyone. I've performed with people with whom we didn't share a common spoken language. Like, I remember going to Japan and playing with some Japanese cats, and they didn't
My
speak
God,
English. I didn't speak any Japanese.
it's
And
so
we played
funny.
we played 2 hours of music together. Because we had that common mode of communication. And it allowed us to create for hours in a nightclub. It was great. It was a great thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just try to like picture yourself. This is baffling. You're sitting there with somebody, and they don't speak a word of your language, and you're like, okay, you play piano, I play this, so I'm gonna do this, and then you do
Mhm.
that, and then we're gonna figure this out without even no words, no nothing. It's
Yeah.
crazy. It's
It
crazy. It's crazy. It's nuts.
'Cause it is. It's a universal language. It's a common language, and these guys were familiar with, a lot of American
They
jazz and
love it.
R&B.
They
Yeah.
love American
W
culture. It's
we had
bananas.
that we had that kinda common footing, we could start playing a Herbie Hancock tune, and everybody in the room, we all knew it. We all knew
I
the
love
chord
that.
changes, we knew the melody, and, we were off to the races without even be able to say, like, "Hello, how are you today?" in the other person's language. Couldn't do it.
I love like for example like British when you take like British proto punk and those bands and when they, especially like some of them like they come to the US and they play with American performers, especially like rap performers.
Right.
And I love watching these clips because they don't speak the same language. I don't care if they speak a different version of English entirely. And they're able to bring rap punk, which is starting to become a thing. And believe it or not, there's actually really good versions of it. It's not all
Sure,
shit.
sure.
Um, and like really give like this like zest. Like you throw lime juice on there, you're like, whoa, what is this? I love wild shit like that. When you just take people like that, like you and a Japanese person that doesn't speak a word of English,
Right.
and just put that in a room and see what happens.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I joke, but I am only semi-joking, is what you just said to this band, the shirt that I'm wearing, Humble Pie. I've been doing some touring with them, so the band is half British, half American. And because I lived in England for about a year and a half, sort of in my younger days, I'm very often I'm the band translator. I translate British into American and American into British.
I
We're all
feel your
speaking
pain.
English. Yeah, yeah, but I'm trying to like what he said was or what he meant was. So
I had somebody on this podcast that was from, I think, Newcastle in the UK. I have a friend that's from Manchester.
Mhm.
And I think it took me about like 6 or 7 months until I was able to understand her. I'm not, because they speak a completely different
Yeah,
language than we do.
yeah.
And just the proudness I feel that I'm able to have a full on conversation with somebody from North England.
Speaking English.
Yes, I am very proud. I'm very, very proud.
Arguably, the King's English, arguably, English comes from England, like, we're the ones who've bastardized the language and the dialect, according to the history books.
Yeah, we made changes because we didn't like the way that they were doing things.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, we're
But
like, why is there
but
a
you
U in color? No, we're getting rid of that.
don't need that.
No, we don't need that. Throw that away.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, if they're trying to make their own punk version, no, we're going to do a better version. Yeah, we're going to be better than they are. It's so funny. It's like, especially with music culture, you talk about UK and US,
Mhm.
it kind of feels like a rap battle, honestly. You just
Right,
look through the decades. It's like one's trying to be better than the other
right.
constantly.
That's exactly true, and again, I hate to keep quoting, the groups of yesteryear, but there's very famously a battle, if you will, an inspiration that went on between the Beach Boys and the Beatles. So when the Beach Boys put out Pet Sounds, the Beatles heard it and was like, "Uh-oh, we better up our game," and suddenly they put out Sergeant Pepper, sort of in response to what the Beach Boys were doing, and it's like it having that kind of cross-cultural inspiration sort of like makes you up your game. It's like, okay, listen to what they're doing harmonically, listen to how they're composing. We can do that, but we got to do that, but better in our own version. And it becomes like
Well,
a
culture really does
competition.
shape an artist. You feel like when you take somebody that's from a rural place like in Mississippi or in Alabama, or you take somebody that's from Seattle, Washington, these are people that are raised in different backgrounds, different types of families, different types of
That's right.
environments. They're gonna, even with the internet, I feel that their development to their instruments is gonna be completely different. You
Yeah.
know,
I agree with that. I think that's completely true. Yeah. It's not 100% or 1,000% tied to your location, but
no,
certainly the people that you see around you physically live, as you say, like the guitar player down the street, you're going to be able to observe hand position and you're gonna that kind of thing. You're gonna get some.
progression, yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna pick up some things via osmosis from stuff that you see live in person that's going to influence you, which is why all what you're saying, all the musicians from a certain region are going to have a similar kind of vibe because they're all seeing each other and they're all feeding off each other and inspiring each other. So there's absolutely still regionalism alive and well, even though, the web has kind of made us all more homogenous in a way,
Right.
because you do have access. You can go watch musicians from Bali now. You can pull up a clip right now and check out all the gamelan playing in Thailand. You're like, yep, got it. Cool. You
Yeah,
know,
all the I've been getting all the electric metal bands out of
yeah,
Philippines. Oh,
fantastic.
it's so hilarious. There's like one, I think they're called like Neon Blitz or
Uh-huh.
something. They like dress in neon green. They come out and they're just like, oh sunny, and they're just screaming at the crowd like with sunglasses, like pitch. Just what are you doing? But it's just so enjoyable.
Yeah,
And this is from the Philippines.
right.
I'm like 19-hour flight away from there.
Right,
Bananas.
right. And they're probably trying to emulate XYZ, whoever it is,
Right.
Black Sabbath, and getting it completely wrong, but and wearing neon colors and coming up with their own Filipino bend on the thing, and now they got
Version.
yeah,
Yeah,
and they've got a whole new thing going on. Like,
exactly.
you got it, guys, take it. It's perfect.
Oh my god. It's just wild because when you're that's kind of the coolest thing about the internet is you're able to see all these different peoples from different parts of the world.
Mhm.
Let's be honest. I mean, the Philippines is very different than most places in the US, okay?
Sure,
Like
sure.
as much as they try to like emulate American novelty. So, being able to see that spin now, think about it like go back 20 years. How would you able to know that even exists? Either A, you would have to fly there and see it for yourself.
Right,
B, you'd have to know somebody that wrote something or maybe had an article or something, but you'd have to know who that person was.
right.
It wasn't common knowledge.
That's right. Yeah, we used to read the fanzines, the self-published magazines that would tell us where, all the new punk singles out of
Yeah.
San Francisco, for instance.
Yeah.
'Cause there would be some journalist or some tastemaker in each market that would sort of like, I heard about this from so and so, and I
Right.
checked it out. So, but it was much more circuitous, and it felt a lot more precious too when you got a piece of good information like, oh, there's a new band out of the UK, you got to check these guys out, and be like, wow, oh, this is great. Felt really exciting to get something new across your desk that turned out to be really interesting and good. But it had to go through a lot of gatekeepers to get there. Whereas now with YouTube, for instance, you can have global distribution of your music with one click,
Yeah.
which is an enormous amount of access to the world. The problem is everybody else has the same access. So now there's so much more content. Like, how do you rise above the fray when there are, rather than 1,000 records coming out this week, maybe there's like, 1,000,000 people putting up a song, or 100,000, whatever it is. It's like it's just a huge amount of content that's available. So uh, uh, having people be able to find it, that's sort of the new trick in the way the marketplace is
I
working
I
now.
really I tried really try to have like the mentality where social media is a really great tool, but don't let it control you.
Sure.
You don't need to make yourself crazy. You don't have to go to the extreme levels. Like, look, if you're an instrumentalist, if you're like, a bass player and you want to show off the work that you're doing,
Mhm.
um, you can do that
Right.
on social media and you don't need the pressure of like, well, is anybody going to find me? Doesn't matter.
Right.
Does it really matter? No.
Yeah. Doesn't matter, and also you can't plan it that way, because if you're planning it that way, again, that's not an artistic decision, that's a marketing decision. And we've all seen people who have, like, dedicated their lives to becoming influencers or whatever it is, and they're spending time and energy and money on marketing, on getting the clicks and getting the followers and all that kind of stuff. To me, time and energy spent on that is not time and energy spent on making an artistic statement.
I think being genuine is the most important thing, because the thing is, you can be the best podcaster in the world. You can be the best bass player in the world. But the thing is, if you can't be a genuine ass human being,
Mm,
what are you?
right. And it's also not going to resonate with people. People
People can
can smell
sense things.
plastic. Yeah, they can
Yeah.
smell fake. They know. So
Yeah, they know.
yeah, yeah.
Like, look at the track record of people that tried to fake their way.
Hmm.
They didn't make it
Right.
too far.
That's right. That's right. I mean, you can have moments. You can have a moment of your 15 minutes of fame, as Andy Warhol said. We're all going to be famous for 15 minutes. You know.
Yeah. Let me ask you something. With all the work that you've been doing up until this point, what have you been like currently doing? Like, for example, if people want to reach out, they want to find your work. Um, what have you been up to?
It's fortunately, I feel very fortunate, lucky that it's just kind of constantly keeps going, keeps going, keeps going. There's a whole bunch of different things that I'm working on at any given time.
Oh wow,
If anybody wants to get in touch or check any of it out, I've got a website, funkboy.net,
I love that.
funkboy.net, and it's got links to everything there. So if you're a social media person, it's got those links. If you're a YouTube person, it's got those links. What I've got something on pretty much any platform you care to enjoy. Over the pandemic, I finished writing a book, a memoir that I put together. Live performances kind of came back about a year and a half ago.
Oh
So I've been
nice.
steadily working. A lot of it, punching the clock, weddings, funerals, and bar mitzvahs. In between the concerts that I do, I've been doing a lot of classic soul, classic rock and roll concerts with artists like. I've got shows coming up with the Happenings, with Jay and the Americans, with the Tokens. I spent many years on the road with the Shirelles, with Sam Moore from Sam and Dave. We've got a tour going out in September with Humble Pie Legacy, the 50 years of the album Smokin' tour that we're going to be heading up the East Coast of the United States. Very excited about that. I did a lot of recording, during the pandemic when we were all shut down. We couldn't perform live anywhere. I started doing a lot of file sharing with all my other musician friends who were similarly sitting at home. And I amassed, we probably did 2 or 3 albums worth of material.
Oh wow.
That's all, these are people that I played with in the same room with for so many years that even though we weren't in the same room, and I put on a bass part, sent it to the drummer, he put on a drum part, sent it to the guitar player, we have enough musical sympathy that it sounds like we're all in the same room together because we know each other's grooves and rhythms well enough, that it doesn't feel like, assembled or disjointed at all. So some of that got released on a label called Color Red Music out of
Oh
Colorado.
nice.
Just a whole bunch of things. It's
Damn.
been
You
very
you
busy.
busy.
Yeah, it's been busy. It's been
You've
good.
been hustling. You've been around.
I'm still every day I'm hustling.
And again, it just goes out to, as an artist, it's constantly being putting in the work because you want to do it. You want to be an artist. That's what makes you you. And I feel that's so important. And sometimes so hard to find that, but when you really do, trust me, it's wonderful.
It's a great thing, yeah. And I do have a balance to strike because this is all I do for money, so I do have to pay my rent with it as
Yes.
well as be able to sort of be fulfilled as an artist and do things that I find creative and fun. So you're constantly sort of trying to thread that needle and have them combine as much as possible. But some gigs are going to be much more about artistic expression. Some gigs are going to be much more about the paycheck. Some gigs are going to be much more about the collaboration with the people that you're working with. So like if you can get all three of those things going at once, you're really
You're golden.
you're golden. But if you can get any two of those things, the music, the money, or the hang, if you can get any two of those elements going, you're in good shape. If you just have one of those elements going, you're gonna have a long night. But those things
Legit.
definitely happen too, right?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, if you love what you love, be sure to check out Funkboy. And I'm telling you, from what I'm hearing over here, there's a lot of fun shit to check out. So be sure to like and subscribe. You want to check out more of the podcasts, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Lost in the Groove Pod. So with that, we'll catch you on the next one. Stay groovy, my friends. I am fucking exhausted. Anyway, we love y'all. Catch you in the next one. Boy.
Ciao.